and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a video on our Acura Legend power steering pump. It's a very fundamental steering pump in the way that it operates, and I noticed that there was some slinging on the back side of the pulley as well as some oil residue below it. That's kind of indicative of a shaft seal, but let's go ahead and replace all the seals, not just the one. I've gone ahead and pulled the pump out of the car, as you can see. We have a new seal kit right here. This is SUNSONG power steering kit repair for this car. This is the reference number and part number there for you. It is out of North America, comes from Raleigh, North Carolina, comes with all the seals that you supposedly need. So we're going to go ahead and take this apart and replace all the seals. Need a little bit of white lithium grease here. This is a multi-purpose grease, but the shop manual calls for a little bit of a multi-purpose grease to be applied there. And we're not going to use urea, we're going to use white lithium for that purpose. So really it's about taking this apart and then piecing it all back together. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So on the front here, you're going to need a 19 millimeter socket to disassemble. So there's our pulley. Go ahead and take this apart. Alright, let's go ahead and get started on our pump reseal here. We're going to start by cleaning up the pump, make sure that we don't introduce any contamination into our pump itself. We'll do this throughout as we notice debris building up inside, but let's go ahead and take a moment right now and get some of that buildup off. Alright, we're going to start by taking off the back 4 bolts. These are 12 millimeter bolts that hold the back plate on. This will spring up a little bit, so just be careful that you might want to loosen the bolts and then loosen the back plate. This will gain access into the back of the pump where we'll find 3 seals that need to be replaced, as well as the shaft, which we'll have to remove to replace the shaft seal. Pro tip here, as you're removing that back assembly, make sure that you put everything in the correct orientation that it's being removed in. That way when you go to reassemble it, you'll make sure that you didn't make a mistake and invert something. Here we find that we've got the assembly off to the right there, that's got the 3 seals on it. Here we have the shaft, and we need to get the shaft out so that we can replace the shaft seal. To remove the shaft, you'll need to remove a clip. Go ahead and remove that clip. This will allow you to push the shaft out instead of into the pump, so it's going to be an outward motion. It takes a little bit to get this clip loose if it's never been replaced before or removed before, so be patient and just take your time and you'll get that clip out, as you can see here.
According to the book, you should be able to remove the shaft by hitting the back end with a plastic hammer. That didn't work for us. We went ahead and used our shop press to gently press that shaft out. Bearing tolerances were pretty tight here, but I suppose that if you hit the shaft hard enough with a plastic hammer, you might be able to gently get that out over time. Instead of using the plastic hammer, it just made more sense for us to use the shop press since we had it available. To get the shaft seal out, I'm using a flathead screwdriver to just gently tap that seal out. It shouldn't take much more than that to really get that loose. Alright, with the shaft seal out, you want to just make sure that you have a good cleaned and prepped surface for the new shaft seal to go back in, as well as clean up any area where the bearing was sitting so that it has a nice even surface to seat in when you go to put it back together. After you have the surface prepped and cleaned, you can go ahead and put the shaft seal in with your fingers. Put a little lithium grease on the inside of that shaft seal so that it's lubricated for the shaft. Alright, so once you put the shaft seal in with your hand, go ahead and just give it a couple taps with a blunt object so that it's seated correctly. Sometimes if you don't push it all the way to its bottom out location, you might find that there's a little bit of leaking that can occur. So I just gently tapped it with an extension just to make sure it was seated correctly before we go ahead and reassemble everything. Alright, we're going to go ahead and put the bearing and shaft into the housing. This is where we're starting to reassemble everything. You want to make sure that it seats in there evenly before you go ahead and press or hammer it back in. If you're going to hammer it, make sure that you put in your socket or whatever you're going to use on the outer race of that bearing and not on the inner race of that bearing, because it will damage the bearing. And make sure that whatever you use is a smaller diameter than the housing of the pump. That way you're not going to mar the housing of the pump. So for me, I went ahead and found that a 1-inch socket, deep socket, was the appropriate diameter to seat on the outside of our bearing. So we'll go ahead and use that and press it in here shortly. Alright, we're going to give it a couple taps here just to make sure it's seated evenly before we take it over to the shop press. You could go ahead and drive it all the way in if that was the only option you had, but with the shop press we're going to make this a little bit easier on ourselves. With the shaft pressed in, you want to make sure you clean up your retaining ring, put a little lithium grease in there to keep it weather tight, and we'll go ahead and finish the assembly for this portion of it. You want to make sure that ring seats in its channel to make sure that it won't disassemble on you. That ring really retains everything. So you'll see me here tap it a couple times with a screwdriver just to make sure that the ring is actually inside the channel. Now that we've got the shaft back together and retained correctly, we can start to work on the 3 seals that are on the back side of the pump. So we'll go ahead and put that spring in, and now we'll go ahead and focus on the O-rings. There's one smaller O-ring, then the larger O-ring, and then there's the final seal O-ring. So you can see I'm pointing here to 2 of the larger ones, and then there's the third one right at the top where my finger is pointing right now. With the O-rings replaced, you can go ahead and reassemble the pump. You want to take note of that stud and line it up with the appropriate hole. It is a splined drive, so you may have to rotate the pump a little bit to get the splines to line up and align the stud to the hole. When you're putting on the back plate to the pump, make sure that you do so in a crisscross pattern. Also take note to incrementally tighten down each bolt on the back as to not damage any of the internal mechanisms of the pump. Also, I'm using 1/4 inch drive to make sure that I don't accidentally strip anything. It's a very hard to replace item at this point as pumps have been discontinued for quite a while, so you would have to source another pump if you ended up damaging something. To make sure that the pump is sealed properly, I recommend using a torque wrench. I'm using a 1/4 inch torque wrench set at 20 Newton meters. Next, we're going to disassemble the inlet for the low pressure side. This will allow us to replace a seal that's on the inside of it. I'm checking the pump right now to make sure that the pump is operating smoothly. This is a 10mm bolt right here. Go ahead and release the bolt by unscrewing it. As you can see throughout the video, I continue to clean everything just to make sure that we're not introducing any debris. You can see the O-ring right here on the inside of that pipe. We're going to go ahead and remove that O-ring and install the new one from the kit. But first we're going to make sure that we clean it with some brake cleaner. That way we have a really nice surface to work with and we're not going to introduce any contamination to the pump. With the O-ring installed, it's time to reassemble the inlet pipe. Give it a gentle twist as you apply gentle pressure. This will allow the inlet to seat correctly without tearing the O-ring. Since this bolt doesn't require a lot of torque, I just used my 1/4 inch ratchet and gave it a snug. All right, our last step here is to go ahead and remove the pressure valve cover. Two 10mm bolts hold this on. It is important to note that the O-ring kit does not include the O-ring for this. So if you don't want to replace this O-ring because you didn't have it in the kit or don't have it individually available, you might want to leave this alone. I'm going to go ahead and replace this O-ring since I ordered it special. Once you have the O-ring seated properly, you can put the plate on and torque it down if you so choose. I went ahead and snugged this down as well since it doesn't require, again, a lot of pressure to hold it on.
All right, we've got the power steering pump put back together, all new fresh seals, nice smooth movement, and we've got it all cleaned up for the most part. Couple spots need to be worked on, but not a problem. So one thing about this kit is that the O-ring right here doesn't come with that. So we had to improvise and find a O-ring that would fit that. We'll see if that holds. It should. It's essentially the same, but it's a little smaller in inner diameter. This part right here where we have to push the shaft out is the only thing that's a little bit complicated. According to the book, you should be able to use a rubber hammer. We had to use our shop press to press it out and then press it back in. But otherwise, it's a pretty DIY friendly process. The kit is pretty inexpensive, so this is a cheap and effective way to rebuild your power steering pump. We'll put it back in the car, test it out, make sure it works as we anticipate. And that'll be it for this one, and we'll see you on the next.